Just talking about the nature of the sport, Pierre, and the copycat element of every cup winner. What is everyone else going to take from what they've done? What do you believe that is in Vegas?
Well, I wrote about this a couple of days ago, but this is a big, big blue line group. and it kind of flies in the face of, a lot of the analytics and the way that I think the modernized philosophy of some of the players that should populate your blue line. These guys, these are big boys. This is big boy hockey here on the back end. And at the end of the day, there's also a lot of talent. I mean, you can't just be big. That's not good enough. You got to be good as well. But there isn't a single player under 6'1" on this blue line. And I can tell you from being in the rink for this final that Florida has not been able to set up shop with the same sort of comfort and repeatable effect than they have in the 3 previous rounds. And a big part of that, and you see it when you see the whole ice and the play sort of develop in front of your eyes, they're really being kept to the outside. And it's not, it's not of a big, bad, bruising blue line. They're not even that physical. It's more just the reach and the range of this big Vegas blue line and how it really frustrates, Tkachuk and Barkov and the Florida forwards. And they've admitted that. They're trying to find a different way to produce offense. But I don't believe in copycat. I think there are different ways to win championships. I don't think everyone should be trying to do it the same way. But if you ask me, what really has struck me being here at this final for the last, I guess it's 12 days now, it's the size and strength and mobility of that Vegas blue line.
You kind of answered my question a little bit. We throw out the cliche copycat, Pierre. How many teams would actually apply it? How many teams would view their defense core and say, that guy's 5'8" and gets 14 points a year, let's move? Like, how many teams are going to do that and say, we got to get bigger and stronger on the back end?
Yeah, and no, dog, listen, there's still room for the 5'8" guy. I think, so you have to find the balance in your lineup with it, right? I mean,
Pierre, just let me say this. I've only got room for the 5'8" guy if he's quarterbacking the power play, like a Rafalski, and he's getting you a lot of points, and he's not a liability. Because if you're a liability and you get pushed around the playoff time, I got no use for one.
Well, and we talk about copycat. You know who they're copying? Tampa. That's who they're copying. You know who's been the biggest?
I was just going to get to it, Brian. I mean,
exactly.
That was part of my piece, is that it's not like Vegas is the first team in the last few years to figure this out. They've just, I guess you could say, gone all in on it. But even the smoke and mirrors Habs team that went to the 21 Cup final relied heavily on what I call the big trees on the fence, tree trunks, right? Weber, Petrie, Sherratt, Joel Edmondson. But you're right. When Tampa really got over the hump, part of it is, look how big their blue line was. Again, super talented, but Hedman, Sergachev, Ryan McDonough, when he was still there, total shutdown guy for them. These are big, big players. And the other part of having these big players is that there's a durability aspect to it, generally speaking, that you can sustain 2 months of a playoff grind a bit better when you're built when you're built that way. And, Chris McFarland is someone that I traded messages with about this very theory because, his blue line wasn't quite as big last year. But, the move that they made that they felt they had to make in terms of making sure they had the depth to win the Cup, he speaks a lot about going out and getting Josh Manson at the blue line and adding some size for what he knew was going to be, well, they hope would be a long playoff grind. And it's also why they re-signed him. So, I think, it's something that's interesting to me because I think it's almost counterintuitive to the way that a lot of people think the game today, and I understand why. But it goes back to something I've often said on this show to you guys, that sometimes there are players that get you to the dance, and then there are certain players that help you get to the end of the dance. And I think the size and range of this Vegas D and of those Tampa blue lines, absolutely. I think you can run a link there between the two.
Yeah, they were the biggest pound for pound defense in the league for 3 or 4 years. I think they still might be, even without some of the subtractions.
Right.
And that was always the secret sauce of Belichick and the Pats. Like, you hear players that play there and coaches that have come and gone. They're like, everyone wonders what Belichick does differently. He gets the biggest, nastiest people on the line. Like, that's because it's a physical sport. So you can look at stats, you can look at, trick plays, you can look at, all these different things. But over the course of a grind,
Physical
who's bigger,
disruptors.
who's nasty, exactly. Who's going to stay healthy, who's going to intimidate. And that's like Belichick says it. He's like, there's intimidation is a part of the sport. And you cannot quantify it.
And
you
Pierre,
can't.
there is a few different ways. I guess Chicago wasn't really a bunch of bullies, but it always seems to go back to being big, strong, and physical and fast, and it doesn't seem that complicated.
And listen, I know we'll all get radioed for this conversation. I know there are people who didn't like my column this weekend about it because, again, it flies in the face of where a lot of people think the game today. I'm just telling you, it's all about balance, but also, again, we just mentioned the teams in the last few years with big bodies on the back end. It is what it is. I mean, I don't know why you want to argue about it.
It's fact.
It's clearly,
right.
it's clearly a factor. The other thing I would say, because I heard the preamble that you guys had about the Golden Knights management going into this, I will tell you that, Kelly McCrimmon met with the media on media day before the Cup final started, and it was clear that I think he had a couple things that he wanted to get off his chest in a very diplomatic way. But, it's not a team that gets covered that much during the year, right, in terms of the national media. And if there's one thing that clearly I think has annoyed the Vegas management is this notion that they've just been people that want to go out and get the next shiny toy every time there's a shiny toy available. I think they take offense to that. And his point to me was, we wanted to go out and find a number one center, and we got him in Jack Eichel. We wanted to go out and get a number one defenseman, and we got him in Alex Pietrangelo. Those weren't decisions made because suddenly there was a shiny toy available. Those were all part of a plan that, frankly, if you listen to them, started almost from the moment they lost in the Stanley Cup final in their inaugural year. They knew that was a bit of a reach. And they knew that team wasn't a true contender, and they set out to actually build one. And, well, it looks like they did that.